So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to Sao Paulo Airport in Brazil. I'm recording the intro to this video here rather than when I actually started this trip in London, simply because it is so much warmer here. It was freezing cold outside Terminal 3 when this journey actually started. Now Brazil is UN member number 98 for me, closing in on the century, and in this video I'm going to show you what I found here. I'm moving around a little bit actually. The primary purpose of the trip is to visit my mate Steve, who has featured on this channel once or twice before. He's currently up on the northeastern coast of Brazil, close to Pipa Beach. So I'm going to be flying this morning up to Natal, spending a couple of days with him before flying back down to Rio to spend a couple of days there. So if you'd like to see what I found in Brazil, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt and this is Matt's Planet. I aim to entertain, educate and inspire with my travel adventures from planning to execution. I'll show you how you can travel in style for a lot less than you'd think. So subscribe so you can come with me. I'd flown down from London on BA as I shared in this video, and I continued on up to Natal on LATAM, which I reviewed in this video. We'd toyed with the idea of spending a night in Natal before heading over to Pipa Beach, but in the end we decided to head straight to the beach, after a quick churrascaria dinner of course. Churrascaria is Portuguese for the Flintstones. Pipa Beach is a little over an hour and a half's drive south of Natal, the last 20 miles or so of which is down a pretty average road. The town is built on a gentle headland and is surrounded by beaches, and as those facing east point straight at Equatorial Guinea in Africa, there's some decent surf, and a decent surfing community has grown up in the town. Northern facing beaches are a lot calmer and are extremely pleasant. You're only 6 and a bit degrees south of the equator here, so the temperature of both the air and the water was perfect. It's also extremely tidal, so this entire beach disappears at high tide and is only accessible at low tide via a not insignificant walk around from Pipa's main beach. It is quite remarkable how much infrastructure builds up for the 6 hours or so that the beach is accessible. This is the beach right by Pipa's main drag, and as it is more accessible it was quite busy. This was early January, so there were a lot of local visitors and the schools were still on holiday. Pipa is very popular amongst Brazilians, and perhaps oddly there's also a large Argentinian presence in the town. This beach also largely vanishes at high tide. I spent most of my time in Pipa relaxing with my mate Steve, so didn't film a whole lot of the town itself. It gets a little more built up further along, and there's a good range of bars and restaurants, perhaps unsurprising given the youngish profile of visitors. We also went a little way up the coast to Tibau, which may have been an even more attractive setting than Pipa. Plenty of bars and restaurants right on the beach too. Always nice to have a cold beer with your toes in the sand. Be aware that Brazil is unusual in having zero tolerance to drink driving, so whilst hiring a car is certainly an option and will make transfers from the airport much easier, leave it at home if you're out on the town. One last mention of the wildlife in Pipa. This was a timbu, more widely known as a white-eared opossum, and a friendly one at that. This fellow was also really friendly and is known locally as a cat. There were monkeys frolicking amongst the completely safe and not at all alarming electricity pylons, and there was even a horse living amongst the foundations of a house under construction over the road from where I was staying. I liked Praia da Pipa. It's a bit of a pain to get to, but I think that's what's keeping it special. Some language skills, ideally Portuguese, but even Spanish will really help you, and it can be tricky to find top quality accommodation, particularly during the peak season. No international brands have properties there, but it's the sort of place where an adventurous spirit will be rewarded with a fantastic experience. I was flying south from Joao Pessoa airport, so we decided to spend a night there before I left. It's about a 2-hour drive south of Pipa. Joao Pessoa is probably somewhere you've never heard of, yet it's a bustling city of nearly 1 million people, so only London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Bradford and Glasgow have larger populations in the UK. It has a vast, magnificent beach right at the heart of the city and is far, far more developed than Pipa, with high-rise buildings and branded hotels and restaurants. Indeed, we couldn't resist another visit to the Sal e Brasa Flintstone area. Like many larger cities in Brazil, Joao Pessoa has a reputation for not being the safest place to wander aimlessly around. The city still has buildings from its Portuguese and Dutch colonial periods, which we visited, although I erred on the side of caution and didn't take my cameras with me. It's certainly very pleasant, although it's no Cartagena or Havana. The city is in Paraíba state, which is the fourth poorest in all of Brazil, but I didn't feel unsafe or unwelcome at all. Indeed, after dark, the nightlife was extensive and was really vibrant. It was still holiday season, so I doubt it's this active year round. It was an absolute pleasure to be part of. Cheap too. Joao Pessoa's claim to fame is for being the easternmost point of the entire American continent. That's not perhaps obvious, and a lot of people may think Cape Spear in Newfoundland has that easternmost honour, and it certainly wins if the criteria is North America. But when you look at all of the Americas, Joao Pessoa is a whopping 1,200 miles further east, which is about the distance from London to Minsk. The point itself is marked with a monument and some gift shops, although you have to pay about £1 to access it through the rather cheesy amusement park that surrounds this public landmark. I'm a bit of a sucker for cheesy geographical landmarks like this, and it is by far the easiest of the 4 cardinal points of the Americas to visit. It's quite a pleasant drive from the city too. Joao Pessoa is a very different proposition to Pipa, but I still really liked it. I doubt I'll book a 2-week holiday there anytime soon, but if I'm in the vicinity I would go out of my way to get back there for a day or two, as it was really very nice. From JP I flew to somewhere I'm sure you have heard of, which was Rio de Janeiro. I stayed at the Arena Ipanema Hotel, which is very close to the headland between Ipanema and Copacabana beaches. I liked the hotel, although it was quite expensive at £160 a night. Because of health issues, I'd only been able to book quite late, and as you'll see later, it was still holiday season in Rio. There's actually not an abundance of hotels in that area, but I picked this one as it had a rooftop pool, perhaps better described as a rooftop bath, and it offered some amazing views at sunset. It's hard to know where to start when talking about Rio, but the beaches would be a logical place. Copacabana is a vast expanse of golden sands leading down to the ocean. Not sure what was going on here, but it was quite cute to see the kiddies out having fun. Around the headland is Ipanema, which is another vast expanse of golden sands leading down to the ocean, which was a little calmer this side of the headland. Both had a cluster of bars behind the beach, Ipanema having slightly more, I felt, where you could get a very cold beer or a fresh coconut. Lots of fresh coconuts. It really was very nice indeed. As I've said a few times, it was still school holiday time, so I feel this was busier than normal. And when the sun goes down, the vendors pack up their beach umbrellas and pop-up bars and go home, but the party seemed to just continue unimpeded. This was close to 10 PM and there were probably more people in the ocean than when the sun had been up. It was a real experience, and yes, I did go in, but with an eye on security. I didn't take any cameras with me when I did. Speaking of security, I did notice that almost every property in Ipanema was protected by some really sturdy bars, and that does tell a story. Rio has 2 headline attractions, both of which can be found by looking up, and both of which I visited. The first was Cristo Redentor, or Christ the Redeemer. When you get to the top, you get some truly epic views, which you share with a truly epic number of other people. I'd thought I'd been on the first train up of the day, so where all these other people had come from was a bit of a mystery. You can also get there by minibus, which I suspect was the answer to that question, but it is wise to get there early to avoid the crowds, ha, but also to avoid the worst of the midday heat, as there's not a lot of shade up top. It was a beautiful day, and it is truly spectacular up there, well worth the effort. I tried to buy a train ticket online the day before, but the site requires you to register before you can purchase, and the site just refused to accept my info to create a profile. So I set my alarm and got to the train station at around 7:30 AM. This was the line for the cash tickets, but the credit card machines around the corner had no wait, and I was very pleasantly surprised to be able to get a ticket for the 7:40 train. It's not cheap at 117 Brazilian reais, which is £19 or $24 US, but that does include access to the park at the top. There's an enforced stop for a photo opportunity which you can skip through, although they really don't want you to, and then you wait on the platform for the train. I was able to figure out where the train would stop, so I was able to locate myself optimally to get a window seat when the doors opened. A surprising number of people can get on each train. Then it was about a 20-minute haul up the hill to the upper station. There's not that many vistas on the way up, but sit on the right if you can for the one vista reveal that does elicit a gasp, although everyone gets equal access to even better views at the top. Aside from the statue itself and the viewing platform, there are some facilities up top, including toilets, some souvenir shops and a couple of food and drink options. There's also a chapel built into Christo's plinth. Not sure it's always open, but I think a baptism was in progress when I was there. And to come back down, there's a holding area where you wait for the train and can buy the photo you may or may not have taken at the bottom. I actually skipped the first train to be first onto the next one, which allowed me to get a rear-facing seat for the descent, which is very similar to the ascent, only the other way round. And when I got back to the bottom at around 9:40, I had a quick look at the automated ticket machines, and the next train you could buy a ticket for was 11:40, so 2 hours later. So it is a place to get to early if you don't want to spend hours hanging around. If you enjoyed that sequence, my mate Mark Swain of Let's Make a Trip visited Rio a month or two before me and made an excellent video on the logistics of visiting Cristo, including a lot of detail about the train. I'll pop a link in the description below if you want to check that out. He also made an excellent video about the other headline attraction in Rio, which is Sugarloaf Mountain. Again, I was up early to beat the crowds, although the weather wasn't brilliant that day, with some low cloud cover, which I think was enough to keep the masses away. After a short wait, I was able to buy a ticket, 160 reais this time, which is £26 or 32 US dollars. Again, it's not cheap, but it's probably necessary to price this experience highly to keep the demand for tickets under control. There's only capacity for a couple of hundred people an hour to get to the top. It's a two-stage process to get up the mountain with an intermediate stop on Urca Hill. This was one of the first cars of the day, and most of my fellow passengers seemed to be workers commuting to their workplace. At this intermediate stop, there's some shops, restaurants and meeting spaces, plus exhibits about the cable car's history. They're building a zip line from the summit, which will finish up under that green awning on the left when it's complete. Not sure how I'd feel about that as an experience. Then the second leg glides serenely up to the clouds and the summit of Sugarloaf itself. It's about 85% as high as Cristo's platform, so the views aren't quite as spectacular on a clear day, but it's still pretty epic. There's quite a lot of space at the summit too, so it's relatively easy to get away from the crowds and enjoy some solitude. That's Copacabana Beach beyond that ridge. There were particularly good views over Rio's second domestic airport, which is built out into the harbour. Very unusual to be able to look down on planes as they climb out of an airport. There's also a secondary cable car for supplies. That green awning is where that zip line will depart from. I spent close to 2 hours at the summit just enjoying the views and the warmth. I flew back to the UK that evening and it was 4 degrees below zero when we landed. Sugarloaf Mountain was a really good experience, similar in many ways to Cristo Redentor, but very different in many others. If you visit Rio, I'd strongly recommend doing both, but set the alarm to get there early. And of course there's lots more to do in Rio. I was only able to scratch the surface in the 2 days I spent there. So I've got a couple of hours before it's time to head to the airport to fly home, so I got the opportunity to sum up some thoughts. Brazil, it's huge, it's complicated, it's youthful, it's vigorous. All the words that you hear on those TV travel documentaries, they're all true. It's not perhaps a destination for the complete novice traveller. The language can be a barrier and you do have to be more aware of your security here than is the case in some other destinations. But it is a very, very rewarding place to visit. So to summarise the places that I did visit, Natal, just drove through it, no real opinion. Praia da Pipa, well, it's a little bit off the beaten track, which is probably one of its biggest attractions. It's a bit of an effort to get there, but you are rewarded when you do so with some amazing beaches and lots of them. Some great nightlife, good food, good drinks. It's very cheap too, which is an attraction for me and a lot of other people. It's the sort of place where if you go and then go back in 10 years, you probably won't recognise it. Speaking some Portuguese will really help you, but you'll probably be able to get by if you don't. And then probably the biggest surprise of the trip was Joao Pessoa. Didn't have a particular awareness of the place before Steve suggested it as a place to pass through, and it was really quite nice. An amazing beach, massive again, and a really vibrant nightlife that was really fun and safe to participate in. And finally, Rio, one of the world's greatest cities, and certainly a place that you have to visit. It's the height of summer and the schools are out at the moment, so it's not been perhaps a typical experience. And it is a place where you sense that the locals come first. Tourists are more than welcome, but it's not necessarily been designed with the tourist in mind. Which on balance is probably a good thing, but you do find yourself bouncing off the surface a little bit in some of the things that you try to do. The headline attractions are obviously geared up for tourists and English is widely spoken, and they are pretty amazing places to spend some time, let me tell you. I mentioned security a couple of times now, and it is something to take seriously when you are here. I found I've taken more precautions here than I have in any other part of the world, and that's included not going out wearing a watch, taking all of that non-essential stuff out of my wallet, not taking my phone unless I'm taking an Uber, and therefore would need to have my phone with me. I've not had any trouble, I've not seen any trouble, I've not sensed any trouble, and I've also not been wildly adventurous, sticking to a patch pretty close to the hotel after dark. And as it is school holiday times, the place is still absolutely rammed, even up till 10 o'clock at night. Some of Brazil's other cities, like Natal, have an even worse reputation for being a little bit dangerous for the foreigner, but I wouldn't let that put you off a visit. Take the necessary precautions and perhaps a few others, stick to the main touristy areas, and I'm pretty sure you'll have a stress-free visit. So will I be back? Absolutely. I'd love to come back to Rio, but probably at a different time of year, perhaps when it's a little bit cooler, because it has been a bit draining with the heat and the humidity. And having had a taste of a place I've never heard of in Joao Pessoa, I'm sure there are many other places in Brazil that are well worth visiting, and I'm looking forward to getting back and seeing a few more of them. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Give the video a like if you did, and leave me a comment. Have you been to Brazil? Are you tempted after watching this? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, there is a Patreon account, the link in the description below. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.